Hey everyone, welcome back to Stadium Stats. Brought on a guest last week in Jack, and he is back for week 4. So, without
Hello, let's get at.
let's get at it. Up first on Thursday Night Football, we've got a divisional matchup between the Cowboys and the Giants. And historically, the last 2 times these teams have played, it has been very one-sided. The Cowboys won 40-0 on their opening night last year, and then also won against the Giants in a brutal fashion in their second matchup. So, historically, this is pointing towards the Cowboys. But this season is weird. So, I would say I think this one will be pretty close. The Giants just took down the Browns, who also don't look that good. But the Cowboys just lost. Now they have the same record. They're both 1-3. And the Cowboys did have a really big comeback in the fourth quarter against the Ravens, but they looked terrible besides that fourth quarter. For that reason, it is hard to say that the Cowboys are distinctively going to win, but I am going to still pick the Cowboys to win. What are you thinking?
I like the Cowboys. I think they dominate the Giants. I think that the defense, although has looked weaker, we should see Neighbors have another really good game. I'm excited to see him get after Daniel Jones, and I think we see a big reason why Dak Prescott just earned that contract this week.
That's fair. Up next on Sunday afternoon, we've got the Bengals taking on the Panthers. And the Panthers had a resurgence game with Andy Dalton, the Red Rifle, at the helm. And he threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had a great game. It's clearly making the decision to bench Bryce Young look a lot better than it had before he played. The Bengals, on the other hand, are now 0-3. They are one of the 3 teams that are 0-3, and historically, that means you have a very low chance of making the playoffs. I think it's about 2% of teams have made the playoffs coming off an 0-3 start. So they're fighting an uphill battle, especially considering they lost to a Commanders team that, while they're 2-1, hasn't had that impressive of wins, and their defense is not very good. It was a very high-scoring game. The Bengals' defense was even worse. The Bengals' offense, however, looks pretty good. Joe Burrow doing Joe Burrow things and playing pretty well. He's improving every week, and this week he looked really good. Jamar Chase finally returning to form, especially with T. Higgins coming back. Super good performance out of Chase. 2 touchdowns. Iosavash catching a couple touchdowns as well. The Panthers, though, did look like a different team under Andy Dalton. Both on offense and defense, they looked better. So I do think, yet again, this one could be close, but I think the Bengals are really going to have this revenge type of game. Coming off this 0-3 start, they're pissed off. They really want to win. And so I think the Bengals are actually going to take this one pretty decisively.
I would agree. I see them decisively just stomping on the Panthers in the locker room this week. They're fired up. They're 0-3. They're like, let's go out there. Let's show who we are. They just want to stomp on them. And I think if they don't, it says a lot about them and their ability to strive under duress. And I want to see them just come back and jump all over these Panthers. And I guess we'll see if Andy Dalton's for real.
Yeah, Andy Dalton revenge game against the Bengals, though.
Yeah.
Which, funny enough, I think Andy Dalton plays all 3 of his former teams in the Bengals, the Bears, and the Saints this season. So
We got a Malik Willis Titans thing again.
yeah, Malik Willis did win that one.
Yeah.
So, anyways, moving on, we've got the Saints taking on the Falcons in another divisional matchup, and the Saints are coming off a rough loss, 12-15 to the Philadelphia Eagles, in which their defense looked phenomenal, with the exception of one big Saquon Barkley 60-yard touchdown run, and that cost them the game. Their offense really couldn't get much going. Kamara looked okay, Derek Carr looked okay, but neither of them were good. Or anything special. Falcons, on the other hand, played pretty close with the Chiefs. Chiefs haven't been playing that impressively this season, so it's not too surprising. But the Falcons look pretty decent. They still lost the game and are now 1-2 to the Saints 2-1. So I do think that this could be a pretty close matchup, especially considering it's a divisional matchup and those tend to be close, especially in this division. I'm going to pick the Saints to win this one. They seemed like the better team this season. I think, again, it will be a close game, as most divisional matchups are. But Derek Carr has led a really good Saints offense this season, and their defense has consistently been really good. And I think that'll be too much for this Falcons offense that really hasn't figured it out yet.
I'm picking the Falcons. Early in the season, going in, I thought the Falcons were going to take this division and run away with it. Obviously, the Saints have had a very good start. Both Derek Carr, and Alvin Kamara have looked very good. They've been healthy. Carr struggled a bit when he was banged up, and the team obviously takes a big step down when Alvin Kamara gets hurt. They've both looked healthy. They've looked good. But I've been with the Falcons from the start. I'm sticking with them. And this week's really going to show whose division is that for the taking.
Well, keep in mind the Bucks could still totally win that division too, and
Bucks
they
could
look
win
like
it, but the Saints are hot. And
both the
Falcons
Saints
look
and
good.
Bucks were hot, and then they both lost this week.
Yeah.
Another divisional matchup, though, is the Jaguars taking on the Texans. And the Jaguars are yet another one of the 3 0-3 teams. And they've looked really putrid this season. They just lost a game by 30 points to the Bills, in which Josh Allen had a near perfect game. He threw for he had 5 touchdown scoring drives in a row to start the game, and just looked unstoppable on offense. And that's coming from a lot of people who thinking the Bills were rebuilding this year or retooling, coming off of trading Stephon Diggs and getting rid of Gabe Davis in free agency. And yet, they torched the Jaguars' defense. The Jags' defense looks pretty bad. Their offense can't get anything going. Trevor Lawrence is throwing picks to Damar Hamlin, in which he looked like he threw the ball to nobody. No one was in the vicinity. It was a terrible throw, and it's just the Jaguars are really playing terrible football right now. The Texans, on the other hand, had a really, really bad loss to the Vikings, but the Vikings look like a really good team. And just like I pointed out last week with Purdy saying that the Vikings defense has been unbelievable, they just put on yet another incredible performance against C.J. Stroud, and some might say one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league. Definitely one of the best young prospects, and he threw 2 interceptions, and he's a quarterback who doesn't typically turn the ball over. He threw 2 interceptions, and they only scored 7 points. So the Texans, I think, need a really big bounce back game, but I think that said a lot about how good the Vikings are. That being said, the Texans are a much better team than the Jaguars. The Jaguars are not very good this year. In fact, they're one of the worst teams in the league. So I'm going to pick the Texans to win this. What do you think?
I think this game's going to be lower scoring than on paper it seems like. I think this Jaguars defense is a lot better than they played last week. This Texans defense is honestly not as good as their offense, of course, but it's pretty good. And I think you put 2 good defenses together, 2 teams that kind of rely on the run game. I'm excited to see how this game turns out. I would still pick the Texans, but I think it could be a close game.
Fair. I could see the Jaguars doing something in this game, but they really need to go back to their 2022 form of Trevor Lawrence if we're ever going to see this team make any strides.
Yeah.
Moving on, we've got the Broncos taking on the Jets, and this is a game in which both teams coming off big wins. The Broncos beating the Bucs in a game in which Bo Nix looked pretty good. The offense looked pretty good, and the defense looked great. The Jets, on the other hand, Aaron Rodgers had a phenomenal game. They destroyed the Patriots, didn't let up any touchdowns on defense, and just had a phenomenal game. The Jets are, on paper and in practice, a better team than the Broncos, so I'm going to pick the Jets to win this one. But I do think the Broncos are going to have a little bit of momentum going into this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they put up a pretty big fight.
I see the Jets taking this game early and just running with it. I think that they are by far the better team. The Broncos are obviously coming off a really good win, and the Jets are too. And the Jets have had more time to practice in between, being that they played on Thursday. Their defense is incredible. Aaron Rodgers is. And I just think that these receivers, Lazard looks like he's on pace to keep playing with Rodgers well, and Garrett Wilson's very talented. I think that the Jets are just going to run away on offense. They have two great running backs. They've got a great defense. They're just going to stomp on the Broncos.
Yeah. Moving on, we've got another divisional matchup, this time between the Vikings and the Packers. The Packers, this really varies depending on Jordan Love's status for this game. Because while Malik Willis has led them to 2 victories, he has looked pretty good and played 2 of the best games of his young career, I still think Jordan Love makes a huge difference to this offense, especially in the passing game. Jaden Reed especially has been lacking since Jordan Love got hurt, and so I'd like to see Jordan Love come back and really take on this Vikings team. I want to see that kind of matchup because this Vikings defense looks really legitimate. They look unstoppable. And Brian Flores is a great defensive mind. It makes sense that their defense is playing like this. But I do think this will be a really good matchup and will really test both teams. I'm going to pick the Packers under the assumption Jordan Love plays. I don't think the Vikings' undefeated streak continues. Even though they look great on defense, I think their offense is a bit fluky. They keep getting a bunch of big plays. They really don't have a ton of depth because they've got a lot of injuries to both Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. And so I am going to pick the Packers to win this one because they really just make more sense to win. Sam Darnold is not better than Jordan Love, but he's been playing like it. So if he can keep it up, I think the Vikings will have a chance, but I'm going to pick the Packers.
So the Packers are favored by 2.5 on this game. I like the Vikings. Packers, obviously Jordan Love is better than Malik Willis has been. Either way, they'll both be good. With Love coming off an injury, he'll be slightly worse than he's been. This Vikings defense, though, it just looks really, really good. And on offense, Sam Darnold looks like he could be a legitimate starting quarterback. I think that a lot of this game is going to come down to Justin Jefferson and Jair Alexander battling it out. Just truly the best on both sides going at it. And the Vikings have shown that they need to rely on Jefferson as good as Darnold has looked. And I think that if the Vikings defense can keep doing what they've been doing and Jefferson can still make it work on Jair, then I think the Vikings come away with this one.
Moving on, we've got a matchup between the Steelers and the Colts. The Colts coming off a win over the Bears in which Anthony Richardson still not looking good. Back-to-back weeks, he's looked really bad. Their run game, though, with Jonathan Taylor, looked explosive. It looked back to how it should be behind that offensive line. Their defense playing pretty well against the Bears, although they let up 350 yards to Caleb Williams passing. But they finally got their run defense under control as they went from letting up 250 yards a game to about 60 last game. The Steelers, on the other hand, are 3-0. Justin Fields playing pretty mistake-free football, not turning the ball over too frequently. Had his first turnover last week. And Justin Fields is just a clear step up from Kenny Pickett, and that was all they needed, seeing as they made the playoffs last season. So I do think this team can go pretty far, and I do think this team is better than the Colts are this season. So I'm going to pick the Steelers to win this one. But I do think if there is a team to hand the Steelers their first loss, it's a team like the Colts who could explode and boom in any week under Anthony Richardson. So I wouldn't be surprised for the Colts taking a surprise victory here. I think of all teams to do it, the Colts are one of the teams that make the most sense. But I'm still going to pick the Steelers.
I think this Colts offense can be an explosive offense. I think just Anthony Richardson, he's been making mistakes, and you can't be making mistakes against the Steelers. I think their defense is just too good. Their offense has been too mistake-free, and I think just this is the first team that we've seen in a couple of years that just dominates on defense, even though they're just sound all around on defense. And if Anthony Richardson makes mistakes like he has been, I think the Steelers win this pretty convincingly.
Moving on, we got a matchup between the Rams and the Bears. The Rams coming off a win over the 49ers in an injury bowl where they both were missing a ton of key players. The Rams still missing Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, as well as multiple offensive linemen. But they were able to get it done against the 49ers team that is definitely better than this Bears team. So I guess we'll have to see how the Rams players step up in absence of these injuries, especially that offensive line. If Montez Sweat can get against this offensive line, I think he could do some real damage because there's some key injuries. But I do think that this one relies on the trench play because both offensive lines have been really bad. The Bears' offensive line has really sucked. Caleb Williams has been running for his life. The run game has been getting almost nothing done. DeAndre Swift looking terrible. They switched to Roshan Johnson to be their lead back partway through the last game. So I'm excited to see how that one goes. But I really do think this game is determined by the line play in the trenches. I'm going to pick the Bears for an upset win here, but I do think this will be a close one. A beat-up Rams team just might not be enough to take on this Bears defense.
I agree. I think the Bears defense is just going to be too much for the Rams. And I really just see the Bears winning this game through their defense.
Yeah, pretty simple. It's going to be a defensive game for the Bears, and if Caleb Williams can throw for even close to, or it doesn't even have to be close to last week's numbers, as long as he puts up some touchdowns like he did last week, I think they win this game.
Yeah, this Rams defense has been weak and this Bears defense has been strong. So
yeah. Up next, and our final 12 o'clock window game, we've got the Eagles taking on the Buccaneers. And this is a rematch from the wild card round of last year's playoffs, in which the Eagles got destroyed by the Buccaneers. They couldn't tackle anybody. The Eagles coming off a 15-12 win over the Saints. Saquon Barkley had a huge game. The defense looked way better than it had in weeks 1 and 2, stopping the Saints and holding them to 12 points, in which they were coming off back-to-back 40-plus point games. So really impressive performance there by the Eagles defense and Saquon. The Buccaneers coming off a rough loss to the Broncos. Not really much to be said, except the Buccaneers' hot streak is over. They definitely are still a good team, don't get me wrong, but I think the Eagles are a better team, so I'm going to pick the Eagles to win this one. I think the defense will be too much for Baker to handle if the Broncos' defense was too much for Baker to handle, and I think Saquon will be able to run all over the Buccaneers' defense.
I want to see if A.J. Brown plays.
Is he?
This is the first week that he might come back. We're not
sure.
What
about Devontae Smith? Do you know?
Devontae Smith, no, I don't. I think that he's probably inactive this week. And Concussion, yes. And then next week they have the bye week, so he'll probably be back after the bye.
They both probably will be.
Yes. So I'm concerned to see if A.J. Brown plays in this one. If not, it's going to be really hard for the Eagles to move the ball because I think the Buccaneers will be just their game planning all around Saquon Barkley.
Yeah,
and
you're probably right about that.
Yeah, we would have to see if any of these Eagles receivers could step up because obviously Dallas Goedert is not going to have another 170-yard game. And so, yeah, if AJ plays, I think the Eagles can get it done. Without him, I think it's going to definitely be a struggle.
That's a fair take. Moving on to the afternoon window, we got a matchup between the 49ers and the Patriots. The Patriots looked awful against the Jets. They put up 3 points. Couldn't stop the Jets on defense as well. Aaron Rodgers was dicing them up. And they ended up putting Drake May in. Their offensive line looks abysmal. And there's really not much that can be said positive about the Patriots. The 49ers, on the other hand, blew a huge lead in which seems like a Kyle Shanahan type thing to do. A 10-point lead in the fourth quarter was blown yet again, and it was definitely a meltdown. But keeping in mind the fact that they had a bunch of key injuries, Trent Williams got hurt in that game, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey all didn't play in that game. Devondre Campbell kept getting cooked by receivers on the Rams, and he just looks really, really bad. The 49ers defense can't stop much, and now Javon Hargrave, who had a sack in that game, is out for season with a partially torn bicep, which definitely doesn't help that defense. if there's no way that Juwan Jennings has yet another 170-yard, 3-touchdown game. So somebody else has to step up, and that person has to be Brandon Ayuk if Deebo Samuel misses another week, and it's likely to be the case. I'm not sure about George Kittle. Hopefully he plays, because I would like to see somebody help out Brock Purdy on that offense. Jordan Mason probably going to continue running the ball pretty effectively as he has been through 3 weeks, but last week was definitely the worst of the three. So I am going to pick the 49ers to win. They're definitely the better team. This should be a get-right game for them on a 2-game losing streak. But yeah, this is a pretty clear one. If the Patriots win, 49ers have some major problems.
I think the 49ers clearly take this one. Two things I'm excited to see are in the Patriots receiving core, if they can really get it going against this 49ers weak secondary, and I want to see if either Pop Douglas or Jalen Polk can really take that next step. And for the 49ers, if they're winning this game, if Jordan Mason can just dominate when they're winning, and see if this 49ers team can really just get up big and run quite literally away with it.
Yeah. Up next, we got a matchup between the Commanders and the Cardinals, in a matchup that is the Cliff Kingsbury revenge game. After he was on the Cardinals as their head coach, and now is the Commanders' offensive coordinator. The Commanders coming off 2 back-to-back weeks of no punting. Their punter's gotten plenty of rest. He's prepared. They also had no turnovers last week in a game that had no turnovers or punts for the first time since 1940 against the Bengals. Their defense looks pretty bad as they let up a ton of points to the Bengals and couldn't really stop them. But the red zone defense definitely held strong as they held them to a ton of field goals in the first few drives. Their offense, though, looks really good. Jaden Daniels is looking phenomenal as a rookie. Had the highest completion percentage in a single game for any rookie QB ever at 91%. Pretty impressive performance. The Cardinals lost to the Lions in a game in which they looked like they couldn't really do much on offense. The Lions' defense was too much for them to handle, which was pretty surprising considering they put up 40 on the Rams the week prior. The Cardinals are the better team on paper here, but the Commanders are hot right now. They're 2-1. The Cardinals are 1-2. And so I think this will be a really competitive game between two teams that are both pretty underrated. I'm going to pick the Commanders to win this one, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if the Cardinals took this one home. Just the Commanders are on a hot streak. Jaden Daniels playing pretty well, and if he can continue at that pace, I think they win.
I think this is a battle of the rushing quarterbacks. Both teams equipped pretty similarly on offense. Both teams have weakish defenses that can step up at times. I think it's really going to come down to, can Jaden Daniels or Kyler Murray win this game for their team?
Moving on, we got a divisional matchup between the Chiefs and the Chargers. The Chiefs, they're 3-0. Patrick Mahomes hasn't really had to do all too much. The defense is really carrying the team on the back. And Pacheco still out. Carson Steele not too good in his absence, but Kareem Hunt was just elevated to the team. So it'll be interesting to see how that backfield shakes out. The Chargers, they're pretty injured. I don't know if Herbert's going to play in this game. He got hurt in the last game and re-aggravated an injury, and so he'd missed most of the last game. They looked pretty bad without him, and they had a few other key injuries. Their run game really couldn't get much going either. I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win this one pretty easily. The Chargers tend to put up a big fight against the Chiefs every year, but the Chiefs always have the Chargers' name. So I'm going to pick the Chiefs to win.
Every single season, Chargers put up a good fight. Chiefs come away with the win. Could see the exact same thing happening here. I think the Chargers are a very good football team. Their defense looks pretty decent, and their offense, obviously the run game under Harbaugh is established pretty well. J.K. Dobbins looks really good. But I think the Chiefs' defense just continues to be as stingy as it's been, and this offense with Rashee Rice looking like a true, absolute star is just going to continue to run in stride.
Our final afternoon window game is the Browns taking on the Raiders. And this one might be tough to watch as both offenses are extremely inconsistent. The Raiders obviously have Brock Bowers, who didn't play nearly as well last week as he had in the previous 2 weeks. Devontae Adams, who's been playing pretty well, but they have no run game at all. Zamir White has been pretty bad at running back. Gardner Minshew's been playing pretty decent, but they even had to put in Aiden O'Connell in the last game. The Browns, on the other hand, just lost to the Giants. Pretty bad performance. Amari Cooper finally looked back to form, and Deshaun Watson didn't look terrible, but that O-line is a big problem with those injuries. I am going to pick the Raiders to win this one. They beat the Ravens. I think they'll be able to beat the Browns. But the Browns, if their defense can get back to even somewhat of their form they were in last season, I think they have a chance at this season. If not, I think they're pretty cooked. So I'm going to pick the Raiders.
Max Crosby, one of the best D linemen in the league.
And Myles Garrett.
Of course, but yeah. Max Crosby, he's in every single play. Of all defensive players, he is someone that is in every single play. And against this Browns offensive line that has not looked very good, I think just every play he's going to be getting after Deshaun Watson. This game, I think the Raiders are going to win it. But if Deshaun Watson can play almost basically as well as he did last week, same with Amari Cooper, the rest of this offense gets going. Jerome Ford's been inconsistent. If he can play well, the Raiders, Devontae Adams has been good. He's been not good. We need to see that. There's a lot of question marks going into this game, and I'm excited to see them get answered. But I think the Raiders win this one, and I think it'll be a pretty good game to watch.
Has Christian Wilkins been able to do too much for the Raiders so far this season?
I think he's done a bit.
Because I know he was one of their biggest signings and was supposed to boost that defense a ton. And I just haven't heard too much about him.
I think he's taking pressure off Crosby because you need to focus on them both, and it's just the defensive line has been creating pressure. That's why the Ravens didn't match up well, because they couldn't just run it up the gut with Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Finally, a really good game for Sunday Night Football in the Bills versus the Ravens. The Bills look unstoppable. They are 3-0. They put up 5 straight touchdown scoring drives. Josh Allen just looks unbelievable. Had an incredible passer rating. Isn't turning the ball over. Playing really good football. James Cook playing really well as well. That defense looks really stepping up and holding teams to pretty bad games. The Dolphins didn't do too much against them, and then the Jags only put up 10 points against them last week. The Ravens, on the other hand, they're 1-2. They had a rough start, but they had a pretty decisive win over the Cowboys up until the fourth quarter happened, in which they almost threw that victory, but they did end up holding on and beating the Cowboys. So I do think this will be a really competitive game. I think the Bills are a better team, but the Ravens really need this win more than the Bills do. I think if there's ever a game for the Bills to lose, this one makes sense. So I am going to pick the Ravens to win this one. But the Bills are on paper a better team. And have been playing better. I just think the Ravens are going to be hungrier for the win because they need it more at 1-2 than the Bills do at 3-0. And so I think the Ravens will come away with it.
I think the Ravens are hungrier for the win, but I think just the Bills in a tight game are going to have the better team to clutch up and win the game. So I'm going to take the Bills in this one, but this should be a very good game to watch.
Up next on Monday, our first of 2 Monday Night Football games, we've got the Titans taking on the Dolphins. The Titans look like one of the worst teams in the league as Will Levis continues to turn the ball over a ton of times. He's turned the ball over 8 times in 3 weeks. He leads the league in turnovers. The defense looks pretty okay. It actually looks pretty good, but they just let up a ton of yards and a couple touchdowns to Malik Willis. This was definitely their worst performance of the 3 weeks. They really don't have a lot going for them, and they're 0-3. The Dolphins have even less going for them right now, as Skylar Thompson played terrible in Tua's absence, and Tua is not coming back for a while as he is on IR with a major head injury. The Dolphins really don't have a lot to look forward to. This is not their season. They are injured. and without Tua, they really can't do a lot. Statistically, Mike McDaniels without Tua has been terrible as a head coach. So I'm going to pick the Titans to finally get their first win. But I only think it's because Tua isn't playing in this game. I think if Tua played in this game, this will be a pretty decisive Dolphins victory.
I don't even think if Tua wins that this is a decisive win. I think just if any competent quarterback comes in, Skylar Thompson has not looked good. And I think that the Titans are going to be able to just stop the Dolphins on offense. And they're going to be able to do enough on offense with pieces like Ridley and Pollard and Hopkins. And they're going to edge by and win this game.
And finally, on our other Monday Night Football game, the Seattle Seahawks taking on the Detroit Lions. This is a classic matchup. This happens every year, it feels like. They're always really good games because neither team can play defense against the other one. But this year is different. Both teams have much better defenses than they have in the past. The Seahawks are led by a defensive coach in Mike Macdonald, who's looked fantastic. He's really improved that defense, and they're 3-0. The Lions have been pretty good on both offense and defense, considering they've been a lot better on defense this year than in the past, and have more options on offense as Jameson Williams has really come alive this season. But that being said, Laporta got hurt in last game and really hasn't been doing too much this season, and that is a big loss for them to that offense. But their run game has looked unbelievable. Amon-Ra St. Brown's pretty consistent, and Jameson Williams, if he can have a good game, and if Laporta can play and have a good game, I do think the Lions are a better team than the Seahawks on paper, and I do think they'll come away with the victory here.
I'm going to take the Seahawks. I need to see this defense get burned before I can truly say that they're not going to win. Because on offense, all three of their receivers look amazing. Both Charbonnet and if Walker's healthy look great. Geno Smith has looked like he looks like his old self again. Like 2 years ago, Geno Smith, he was throwing the ball well. He's thrown it again to three good receivers. They have a good offense. Their defense looks great. I really believe in this Seattle team right now as they keep winning games.
I just don't think they go to 4-0. I just don't see it. I don't think they're good enough for it.
Guess we'll find out this week.
Yeah. Moving into the top 10 power rankings. At number 10, I've got the 49ers. They're 1-2, but they really did look good last week. They didn't against the Vikings, but they looked unstoppable against the Jets in week 1. On paper, they're the best team when they're healthy, but they aren't healthy right now. They did lose Javon Hargrave for a season. Deebo Samuel missing some time. So just want to see this team get healthy, and then I can put them higher up on the list and not throw some games against the Rams. That would also be helpful in the power rankings. What do you think?
I agree. 10's a good spot for them.
At number 9, I've got the Lions. They're 2-1. Been playing pretty good football, but they did lose to the Buccaneers last week. But the Buccaneers are a pretty good team, so I really don't think that's too much of a shot against them. Their defense looks improved. Their offense looks really good. They've got a ton of weapons. I really do think this is a pretty good football team, pretty balanced.
I think the Lions are really good. They have a really good defense. Hutchinson looks great. They've got a great offense. It's a good-looking team so far.
At 8, I've got the Ravens. They're 1-2, but they have played some pretty good teams. The Chiefs being one of them in a game that they barely lost. The Raiders, they barely lost. And then they had a decisive lead over the Cowboys, which would have had them higher if they didn't start throwing the lead in the fourth quarter. But because they held on to the lead, I do want to have them on the power rankings. I think they're a really good team. Derrick Henry definitely adds a whole nother element to that offense. Lamar Jackson can get things done, whether it's to his tight ends, whether it's to Derrick Henry, whether it's to Zay Flowers. He's got a lot of weapons around him now, and that defense is still pretty good.
This team's going to keep scripting different games week to week. I'm excited to see how Harbaugh goes about doing that. And I think, this team looks good. They can win through the air, through running. And if Lamar, Derrick Henry, Mark Andrews, Zay Flowers, if they can all stay healthy and their defense can, they're going to be a really good team.
At 7, I've got the Eagles. I think they're still one of the best teams in the NFC. They just beat the Saints, who looked like the best team in the league. And the Saints and Packers, by the way, get honorable mentions this week. They barely missed the list. But Jordan Love being hurt keeps the Packers off, and the Saints lost to the Eagles and didn't look that great on offense, so I'm not putting them on the list. But those would be the top two teams that missed the list. But anyways, the Eagles beat the Saints, and the Saints looked like the best team. So the Eagles have been playing really good football. Yeah, their defense hadn't been great in weeks 1 and 2, but they really improved in week 3. Saquon Barkley continuing to be really explosive and get them a ton of touchdowns. So pretty good team. Pretty balanced. They just need A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith to get back and healthy.
If Saquon stays healthy, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith come back, this defense looks good enough to support an offense that's just filled to the brim with weapons. So, yeah.
At 6, I've got the Steelers. They're undefeated. Justin Fields is playing pretty mistake-free football, isn't really turning the ball over, and there's really not too much to complain about on offense because it's an improvement from what they've been in the past, which last year with Kenny Pickett, they still made the playoffs, and their defense looks unstoppable. T.J. Watt looks like Defensive Player of the Year, early candidate, and not really much more to be said about this team. I think the defense carries, and as long as Justin Fields continues to not turn the ball over, I think they continue winning games.
I need to see this offense take a step up, but this defense is going to keep winning them games. But the moment that this offense can truly explode, take off, the Steelers team is going to be very dominant.
I'm not sure that's what this team is, but I don't know if it needs to be. They're still getting wins.
Yep.
At 5, I've got the Seahawks. They are also undefeated. They had two pretty bad wins in weeks 1 and 2, as they were very close games. But week 3, they had a pretty solid showing, in which they held the Dolphins to 3 points. Their defense is looking phenomenal, and their offense has a ton of options, whether it's DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN as their 3 receivers, whether it's their dual-headed running back room of Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. They've got options on offense. Their defense is great behind Mike McDonald, and honestly, just looking so much better than they have in the past.
If Mike McDonald and this defense can keep looking as good as they've been, I don't see this team losing games in the future because their offense is just truly dominant.
In at number 4, I've got the Texans. They lost to the Vikings last week, but I think the Vikings are a very good defense, and I think it was just a rough game where C.J. Stroud didn't play his best. They still look like one of the best teams. Their offense is really, really good. Their defense has been really good, although they really didn't show up like that this past week, but I still do have a lot of faith in them, and I think that they're a really good football team and pretty balanced.
I think it's the same exact thing as the Steelers. You have 3 really good receivers, you have a dominant number 1 running back that's injured, and you have a very good defense. And I agree, this Texans team is just truly talented all over.
At 3, I've got the Vikings. They look unbelievable, and it's crazy to say, and I do think they will fall off. But for now, they're at 3 because they look like they can't be stopped. They beat the 49ers and the Texans. But yeah, this Vikings team has had some impressive wins. If Sam Darnold can continue playing like this, I do think they'll go pretty far this season. But I think there will be some regression at some point. It's just, when will that happen? So for now, I'm going to have them up here. And who knows, maybe Sam Darnold and the Vikings defense and Brian Flores can prove me wrong.
If this defense keeps looking as good as it's been, yes. I think the defense is going to start to fall off, but for the meantime, yeah, this team is really good.
At 2, I've got the Bills. They really can't be stopped on offense. They're undefeated and are just scoring nonstop, which honestly reminds me a lot of the Commanders as well from last night. They looked fantastic as well, and truthfully, the Commanders could be an honorable mention on this list too. But the Bills have looked really, really good on both offense and defense, have been way outperforming how they were supposed to play. And I think it's just been a pretty impressive team. Josh Allen is looking like an early MVP candidate, and I think if he can continue playing at the level he is, then I think they'll go pretty far in the playoffs.
Yeah, Josh Allen's making it work. He's making Shakir look good. He's making Keon Coleman look good. He's getting the ball to Kincaid. He's just spreading it to everyone. He's looking good doing it.
James Cook is looking great.
James Cook looks great on the ground, receiving. He's doing it all. And this team on defense is just as good as they've been on offense. And if they can keep dominating from all fronts, they're going to have a really, really nice-looking season.
And then at 1, I've got the Chiefs. They're not playing at their full power. Hollywood Brown out for the regular season. Xavier Worthy playing inconsistently, but still adding a lot to that defense or to defensive matchups. And Rashee Rice playing unbelievable football, and yet Patrick Mahomes is not playing his top tier, and the defense is carrying the team anyways. They don't have a run game nearly as good as they had at the beginning of the season with Pacheco now that he's hurt, and yet they're still winning games. So when this team is at full power, I can only imagine how good it'll be.
Travis Kelce, regular season, he's old. He tries to stay healthy. I think he just keeps doing what he's doing, get a few catches a week, help out the offense, help make defenses pay attention to him because he still eats up the zone. He finds the gaps. But they're just going to keep spreading the ball, getting the ball to Rashee Rice, and this defense is going to continue to dominate. And Patrick Mahomes and this offensive line, they'll get it done. And, yeah, this team is just, it's good. It's a very good football team.
Now let's hope they don't three-peat.
Let's hope they three-peat.
Well, anyways, thank you guys for watching, listening. I appreciate it. If you guys could like, comment, and subscribe, that would be much appreciated. I'll be back in a week or two, and I'll talk to you guys then. See you guys.